Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is the podcast that talks about things like internationalizing, location-independent businesses, and going offshore sometimes. My name's Jonathan Lockwood. I'm here with James Guzman. Hey, James.
Hey, Jonathan. How you going?
Good. So I'm excited about our guest today, so let's kind of get right to it. So we talk about a lot of stuff here. And, you've heard us, if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard I'm interested personally in an offshore company, offshore banking and stuff like that for my business. And so I've been consulting with some people, and one of them is Bobby Casey, who is managing director of Global Wealth Protection. They provide asset protection strategies and offshore corporate services, structuring offshore companies, trusts, foundations, and providing bank account introductions to more than a dozen banks around the world. They also help move your IRA funds offshore. Through their partners, they offer investment options and strategies to help you internationalize your life and assets. Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, Bobby Casey.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me. And by the way, I appreciate that intro. I've been looking for a really good intro, so if you could type that up for me, that would be fantastic. You did a really good job with that.
I will email it. Well, the problem, of course, is that, we do this all the time. People send us their bios, and man, if I read that bio, it would be 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And we can't do that. So I just pulled some stuff, actually, I think, off your LinkedIn page and then just minimized it. So yeah, I'll send that to you a little bit later.
I was actually listening to it. I thought it sounded pretty good.
Yeah, but that's just because I'm an awesome presenter. It had nothing to do with the wording.
Right.
So Bobby, you also have Global Escape Hatch. And now, is that only your conference, or does that have to do with the services that you offer as well?
Global Escape Hatch is just our events business.
Okay.
So we've been doing events for a few years now. And so that's just, it's basically just the name of the events that we do. We've done Global Escape Hatch in Panama, Global Escape Hatch Belize, Global Escape Hatch St. Martin, and a few others. So that's just the event business.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's, I did a consult with Bobby last week, and that's when I asked him to come on the podcast here. Why don't we talk a little bit about your background? You're from Southern U.S., right?
You nailed it. Yeah, I'm originally from North Carolina. I was born and raised in North Carolina with lots of brothers and sisters and lived there all the way into my early 30s. And I'd always traveled a lot for business and adventure, really. I've done a lot of adventure travel stuff, snowmobiling in Siberia, motorcycle trips through the Alps, and some crazy stuff like that. But I've always done a lot of travel for business and for leisure.
Okay.
And in my early 30s, I decided, actually, I guess you could say in my 20s, I decided I wanted to live abroad, but because of the business I ran at the time, it wasn't really feasible. So I just took longer extended trips. And then in my early 30s, I sold that company, and I got into the offshore and asset protection consulting actually in my late 20s, but then I sold my company in my early 30s, and you could say I was more or less freed up from that brick and mortar type business. So I'm going on right around 10 years of being a virtual nomad.
Gotcha. Cool. So you owned a bar at one point, didn't you?
I did, yeah. In my 20s, I bought a bar, owned it for about a year, and I sold it. And, that, I don't know, for some reason that people seem to think that's like a really good idea. And clearly at the time, I thought it was a good idea. At this stage in my life, I think I would rather strap my feet down to a chair and smash my toes with hammers than own a bar again.
Okay.
A bar is an extremely unlucrative business that requires an enormous amount of work. I actually made significantly less than my wait staff, who made about $2 an hour.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Another thing is, in Latin America and other places like that, you having a brick and mortar, especially a bar, and have a lot of cash. It kind of sets you up. You kind of making waves, and people will see you, making money, and you might get, visited or who knows. People. It just happens that people get jealous when they see lots of cash going around.
You might get visited.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, who knows, the government or when you get lots of cash going around, it just raises eyebrows. You know what I mean?
James, it's never the government, but it's the local, let's say, mayor's cousin who happens to be in the security business that comes by to make sure that you have a proper security arrangement to ensure that you're safe while you're at work. Yeah, I think it's funny. A lot of people say, God, I can't wait. I want to retire early and get this beachside bar and run this beachside bar in Belize or Costa Rica or something. And I'm like, you are a bunch of idiots.
And they enter
seriously.
the seventh circle of hell in their retirement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have entered Dante's seventh level of hell to own a bar. Like
I got to talk to my dad because that's what he's doing right now.
Oh my God. Poor guy.
I just really wish that Bobby would be forthright about this and stop beating around the bush,
Well, I like to sugarcoat things. I want to make it seem
I get
soft.
that. Come on, relax. Not on this podcast, Bobby.
Right. I just want to sugarcoat it because I want people to still think there's hope out there to make money with a bar.
Yeah. So, all right. At what point did you decide that creating a company like Global Escape Hatch, it was the right time for that and that it was right for you? When did it strike you?
Well, you could say I was running my other company. I had a pretty good-sized installation company in the U.S. We did home installations of like home fitness equipment, home game equipment like pool tables, game tables, outdoor play equipment like swing sets and playgrounds and basketballs and stuff like that. And it was a pretty good-sized company. We covered about 2/3 of the zip codes in the U.S. I had several hundred people working for me, and let's put it as nicely as possible. I hated my customers and all of my employees at the same time, and it was a good-sized business, but I really, really, really hated what I was doing for a living. And, at the time I was about 30 years old. I'd started that company when I was 21. And I was about 30 years old. And obviously at 30 years old, I'm not an old man, but I'm starting to have these thoughts like, do I really want to be doing this 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Or do I want to retire doing this? Absolutely. I don't even want to be doing it now, much less, 10 years from now. So I did a little soul searching, and for years I've done this, and this is a little bit of an aside, but for years I've always done what I call my mancation. I go on a trip alone, usually around the first of the year, and it could be like just a 3 or 4 day weekend or a week trip, or doesn't matter. Sometimes I've done it. I've just gone camping and done it. Sometimes I've traveled to the other side of the planet to do it. But it's just a trip I do alone to kind of reassess, the things from my past year or two, and then kind of set goals and make plans for the future. Well, I did that when I was around 30 or 31 or something like that. And I basically decided I hate what I was doing, and I loved traveling. I knew the type of client, the type of person I like to do business with, and that was entrepreneurs that were doing interesting things, living in interesting places and with interesting businesses. And I wanted to be location independent. And at that time, in my early 30s, I was already doing some consulting, asset protection consulting, and helping people structure their businesses and minimize risk and that sort of thing. And I was working with a couple of different people. But you could say it was almost like a hobby business at that time. I mean, I was doing it with quite a few people, but I still had these other ventures going. And I said, let's get out of this installation business and do this full time. So I sold the installation business in my early 30s, got out of it, 100%. And, you know, I was doing the consulting, and really for me, I think a lot of people tend to, well, let's look at people's normal life track, right? They go to high school to get good grades, they go to college, get a good job, so on and so forth. Well, what happens is your life focus becomes around your career. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go to school to get good grades so you can get into a good college. You go to college to get good grades and get a good degree so you can get a good job. You get a good job so you can afford to pay that mortgage, and you can afford to pay the country club dues and
retire one day, right?
Yeah, and retire when you're 65 years old and contribute to 401k. So what happens is your career actually becomes the center of your life. And you build like in a circle, that center dot, that bullseye, that's your career. Everything else in your life is one of the rings around the bullseye, right? Well, I decided that I didn't want my career to be my bullseye anymore. And I wanted my lifestyle to be the bullseye, and I wanted my career to be one of the rings around the bullseye. So my lifestyle was to be location independent, where I could live and work and travel wherever I am. I mean, I'm not even at home right now. I'm over at the moment. I'm actually kind of homeless because I traveled back. I live in Latvia, and I traveled back to Latvia. I have a couple of apartments here that I rent out, and I had my apartment renting out while I've been traveling for the past 6 weeks, and I came back early, but so my apartment's still rented out. So I'm at a friend's place at the moment. But I wanted my career to be one of the rings around my lifestyle. Gotcha. My lifestyle was to be, location independent, to have the freedom that if I want tomorrow, if I wanted to go to Budapest and spend a week, I can do it. If I want to go to Portugal, and eat grilled fish on the beach, I want to be able to go to Portugal and eat grilled fish on the beach.
All right. So very cool. Well, everything you said there, Bobby, is going to resonate a lot with the listeners of this podcast. That idea of those rings, really strikes them, because this is exactly what they want to do. And the way you put it, interesting people doing interesting things in interesting places, So you're in Latvia. We don't hear, it seems like most of the people are going to different parts of Asia. We're here in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. There's South America. It doesn't seem like you hear a lot of people. Are there a lot of digital nomads, perpetual travelers there in Eastern Europe?
More than you would think, but for sure you have a lot more going. Well, at least Americans and Canadians tend to stay in that side, on that side of the pond. So, right, they're going to Mexico or Costa Rica or Belize or, maybe Chile or Uruguay or something like that. Europeans, there are a lot of European expats here. I know a lot of French and Germans. Quite a few Russians live here. A lot of Italians live here. So, yeah, there's quite a few European, you could say, nomads. I've got a friend of mine who was just in town a couple of days ago, Italian guy, and he's definitely what I would call a digital nomad. He's done some crazy stuff, traveling all over Africa and Asia. And like you mentioned, Asia too. Asia's fairly popular. I know quite a few guys that are spending a lot of time. I got a really good friend of mine who is coming here in a couple of weeks, but he spent the past 3 months between Thailand and Indonesia and Bali. And he sold a company a couple of months ago and started an online business. And basically, I kind of pushed him to do it. Right. And I told him, I said, look, you sold your company, do something online and just go travel for a few months and see what you think. See if it changes your life. And we talk on Skype all the time. And he's like, man, I can't go back. I just can't do it. I can't go back to that old lifestyle anymore. So he's coming to live here for a while after he finishes up in Bali in a few weeks. Great. Fantastic. So you're spreading the virus of internationalization. My business partner lives here. Oh, is that right? Actually, I'm at his house right now. So that's
I'm curious, Bobby, as to the so that business that you helped him start. How long did that take him? And can you? I mean, you don't have to go into detail, but how did you go about getting him an online business with with the income that he was able to live on so quickly.
You mean my buddy that's in Bali right now?
Well, yeah. You said that you got him set up with the online business, and he.
Oh, no. I didn't get him set up. That's all him. I just motivated him. I pushed him to.
Okay. How long did it take him before he was able to do that?
Well, he had a business that was more or less online before. I mean, it was a e-commerce business, but he had all of his product manufactured in China, and he had a small warehouse in Arizona. So unless he hired somebody to run the warehouse. I mean, I say warehouse, it's just a small little 1,000 square foot warehouse. It was a small product, small boxes. And he sold that business. He only ran it for a couple of years. Well, the last business is he actually just started an Amazon store, and he's doing the what's it called, the FBA with Amazon, but he's sourcing some product from Asia, from China, I presume. Yeah. And it's shipping to the Amazon warehouses. So Amazon fulfills it. He just manages the business online, but he doesn't. He actually, I mean, he's seen his product, of course, but he never touches it. He's not part of the supply chain anymore. He pays Amazon their Amazon FBA, their fees. But he's a really smart guy, very good at marketing. And I think he said he started it. It took him like a month or month and a half to get any sales at all, almost any sales at all through Amazon. And then after like the second 2.5 or 3 months, he was bringing in about $5,000 a month.
All right. Well, that was pretty quick.
So, yeah, bad. Not a ton of money. But
no.
Living in Bali, his cost of living is maximum $1,000 a month right now. So,
Great,
excellent. So, we're talking about. Let's get into this. What you do and how you can help people. When people hear terms that include the word offshore, what misconceptions do they sometimes have?
Illegal and immoral.
Right. And is there anything illegal or immoral about moving toward an offshore strategy?
No. I mean, well, that's a little bit of a loaded question. Is it illegal to do an offshore strategy? No. Can you make it illegal? Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Is it immoral? If it's immoral, we shouldn't even be having the conversation with that person, because clearly they're not smart enough to think for themselves.
Right.
They are just reading, mainstream media. They're glued to CNN or Fox or whichever version of bullshit media they want to listen to. So I'm sorry. Can I say bullshit on your show?
Yeah. We're going to say fuck several times. Don't worry about it.
All right. Fuck yeah. All right. So the misconception is it's illegal, and it's illegal because mainstream media, especially in the U.S., is attacking offshore strategies because they're scared of it. I mean, mainstream media is controlled by the government, clearly, and the government's scared to death of offshore because they really have no control over it. They want you to think they have control over it, but ultimately they don't really have any control over it. And they're scared to death because it's a financial drain, and they're scared. They don't know where they're going to get, their next paycheck to buy their Lexus every 6 months, on Capitol Hill, right? So, but there's nothing illegal about it. I mean, there are some strategies that have to be employed to make sure it is legal. You have to properly report if you have financial authority over bank accounts with more than $10,000 in aggregate. If you register an offshore company, you need to file. God, I can't remember the tax form now. I'm not a tax expert.
FBAR or something.
Well, it's not. It used to be called the FBAR. Now it's the FinCEN 114, which is the one for signature authority over bank accounts. But there's other. If you have like more than 10% interest in an offshore company, you have to file. You have to report that. If you're the settler of a foreign trust, You have to report that. If you're gifting money into a trust, you have to report that. If you're taking distributions from a trust, you have to report that. These types of things. You have to do it. But the reality is, as long as you're reporting everything, then you're taking advantage of the offshore strategies without doing anything illegal. What people get in trouble with is listening to charlatans who say, "Wow, don't report it. Nobody will ever know."
Sure.
Right. Or, I won't call any names, but James is clearly very familiar with this one, is we have an offshore strategy that lets Americans put their funds in a trust. They don't ever have to report, and they don't have to tell anybody about the income from it. I think, James, the guy that promotes that structure.
Right. There's so many things. And we go over a lot of these on the podcast. On the internet, there's just so many traps that people get falling. they look on some part of the internet, some website from God knows where, that say that they can do all kinds of things, whether it's 4-month Mexican passport or a trust that they don't have to, all kinds of things that people do. We try to warn people about, because you can really get in trouble with these types of things.
Paraguayan passport in less than 12 months. That's my favorite one, and that one created quite a stir in the offshore world, which is one of the bigger scams out there. Is the under 12-month Paraguayan passport. And you mentioned the 4-month Mexican passport. I mean, sure, you might be able to put your hands on a Mexican passport in 4 months or a Paraguayan passport in 6 or 8 months, but I could tell you, I would be shaking like a leaf going through any immigration line with that passport in my hand.
Mm-hmm. Understood. I want to ask you a little. Go ahead.
Let me make a quick comment about that. A lot of people want to subvert the system. Now, ultimately, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I really believe in the ability for people to govern themselves. We don't need rulers. But we also live in the world where we do have governments, right? Mm-hmm. And in order to live as free as we can, we do have to follow certain rules or we get thrown in jail.
Of course.
And ultimately, if you're put in a pink, my God, what jail am I thinking about? If you're thrown into a jumpsuit and tossed in jail for a year or 2 or 3 for doing something stupid like using a fraudulent passport, something like that, what have you actually done? You've actually limited your freedom. You're not improving your freedom. Do it the right way. You can get citizenship in Paraguay in 4 years. Don't be greedy and try to get it done illegally in 1 year when you can just wait 3 extra years and you have it completely legal, completely legit, and no stress.
Of course.
And it actually gives you freedom, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'm with you. Philosophically, we're in the same place. I like Larkin Rose and what he has to say about the illegitimacy of the need for a state, and yet at the same time, when you end up in that cage, it's real. It may not be legitimate or sensible or right, but it can be very real. And so this
you don't have the key to it.
So again, what's that?
Yeah, but you don't have the key to it. If you end up in that jail, no matter how illegitimate it might be, you're not the one with the key in your pocket.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, all right, let's talk a little bit more about this. There are people listening to this who have some understanding about what it takes to have an offshore company and an offshore bank. But they're not exactly sure, is this right for me and is this right for me now? It's not right for everyone, right? At what point is it right for a person to do this? Can you help us out with that?
Yeah. For an offshore company, that completely depends on what you're going to do with it. Mm-hmm. For example, I've got some clients who are not very wealthy guys, but they have digital businesses. They're digital nomads. They have online businesses, or let's say virtual businesses. Some of them are consultants. They have clients all over the world. Some of them have e-commerce businesses, with clients all over the world. Some of them sell a digital download product. in those cases, I think it makes a lot of sense to have an offshore company because you can take advantage of significant tax savings. And people say, well, it's just so expensive. I mean, to be honest, it costs about the same to set up an offshore company as it does a Delaware LLC. So it's not like there's some big, cost hurdle you got to jump through. I mean, if you're in the U.S. doing e-commerce, you probably have whatever, a Nevada or Delaware or something LLC for your business anyway. So, I mean, if your business fits the criteria to shift some or all of its profits offshore, I'd say it makes sense now. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't need to be making $1 million in profit a year for it to make sense, I mean,
right. Okay.
You could have a small consulting business making $100,000 a year, living as an expat or a virtual nomad traveling around the world. Well, it could make significant benefit for you because you can take advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion, paying yourself from a foreign company that does not have an obligation to collect the social tax, the 15.3% that Americans have to pay. Yeah. Or what they call the self-employment tax. Well, foreign companies don't have to pay that because they're not U.S. companies. But if you're paying yourself as a quote sole proprietor, the $100,000, you still have to pay the social tax.
Right. So now I want to talk about that for a second because that's the thing right there. I think. Now imagine in my situation, it makes perfect sense. But imagine one of these digital nomads who's, maybe he's bringing in $25,000 a year. Well, he can do the foreign income exclusion. He's way below the threshold on that. But the other, so it might not be obvious that he needs any sort of foreign company. He's still saving that money on tax. He's not paying any income tax up to $101,000, something like that. But he is able to get out of those payroll taxes, Social Security and Medicare, right?
Correct. Yeah, that 15.3. So if he's making $25,000, that saves him what, $3,250?
Right. Yeah, that's
$3,250
in 1 year.
We don't even we charge less than that to set up an offshore company and an offshore bank account. So basically you save more in taxes in your first year than it costs you to set up the company. And then ongoing, you're in the black, let's say, every year.
Okay.
Even if you only make $25,000.
Right. Yep. There you go. So that is a reason why you don't have to be very wealthy in order for this to be advantageous for you. Very cool. So
I can give you a couple other scenarios if you want to hear them, because a lot of people with brick and mortar businesses in the U.S. think, well, I'm in the U.S., it's brick and mortar, I don't really have an opportunity. Well, not necessarily, because I'll give you an example. I have a client of mine who has a very large company in the U.S. in the medical business, and they have a lot of Medicare, Medicaid contracts. So they have to be a U.S. company. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, Medicare and Medicaid are not signing contracts with an offshore company in Cook Islands, mm-hmm. right? I mean, not going to happen. But what he has is a lot of patents. And so in his case, what he's done is he has moved his intellectual property to an offshore jurisdiction, and then his U.S. company actually leases intellectual property from the offshore company, and that allows him to shift some of his profits offshore. That's what all your big companies do, mm-hmm. Right. And that's what Google's doing. That's what Apple's doing, and
the Dutch sandwich. What do they call it?
Double Dutch Irish.
Double Dutch Irish. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I read something recently. I think they closed that, or they're in the process of closing that loophole. But I promise you, if they close that loophole, Google will find another solution. Yeah. I promise. Right. Google look at it like this. The United States is typically between $1 and $1.5 trillion deficit every year, right? Google's annual profits are hundreds of billions, almost $1 trillion a year. That means Google is literally at least $2 to $3 trillion a year more profitable than the U.S. Mm-hmm. they're going to find a way. They can pay smart people to figure it out, right? So there's always going to be a solution. They can close that loophole. Google's just going to find another one. Clearly, the government is not going to outsmart the guys at Google.
Right.
Yeah, and don't you think that a lot of the people in the U.S. government, I mean, they want to keep some of these loopholes open for themselves, all these different bureaucrats.
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Mitt Romney, right? Mitt Romney had all his hedge fund and everything. I think it was it Cayman Islands or BVI? I can't remember.
Yes.
These guys don't want to close all the loopholes because they close their loopholes, right? I mean, so yeah, obviously some of the loopholes stay and not just the guys, in DC, it's the guys' buddies, right? It's the guys that run Northrop Grumman, Halliburton, Boeing. It's all the defense contractors. It's the guys who run the healthcare companies, the guys who run the banks. They're not going to close the loopholes for their buddies at JP Morgan Chase, their buddies at Goldman Sachs. They're not going to close those loopholes.
Right. Gotcha. All right. So good. I want to talk to you in a little bit about trends that you're detecting, jurisdictions you're recommending for both bank accounts and companies, things like that. But we have to take just one moment and give some attention to our sponsor. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, your online leader in moral superiority. In the wake of news that NAACP local leader Rachel Dolezal insists she is black while having two fully white parents, the Condescending Group held an online forum headed by the smuggest, most biggity panel of moralistic experts they could find. The conclusion? Your identity is your own business, no matter what. And those who question you? Bigots! Inspired by the Condescending Group's masterfully contorted logic, James and I have been inspired to uncover our true identities. In my case, I will have no need for Bobby Casey's second passport services, since I now identify as a citizen of the island of Dominica. It's brilliant. Now, anyone who challenges me on this is guilty of international bigotry, and I fully expect the government of Dominica to send my passport without delay, or I'm suing. As for James Guzman, after much soul-searching, he's realized with great shock that he identifies as a male sexual concubine for the sexy Honduran model Belgica Suarez. He's booking his ticket to Tegucigalpa right now. The Condescending Group has really fostered something revolutionary with this one. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. Okay, so we're back with Bobby Casey on the Borderless podcast. Traveling, investing, and living beyond borders is what we call this podcast. And so Bobby's been very helpful to me. I had a consultation with him recently. And, he's the managing director of Global Wealth Protection. He puts on a conference called Global Escape Hatch, and he's been talking to us about second passports, offshore businesses and bank accounts, things like that. What I want to talk to you about, Bobby, is where do you see things right now? We're, pretty much at the halfway point of 2015. Are you detecting any recent trends? Is interest in these things lesser, greater, or stable, would you say right now?
So first of all, Jonathan, I have to say, I had to mute myself during your advertisement. I was laughing so hard, I started crying, and I had to start wiping tears away. I've been laughing so hard.
Well, James was too, because you might think he's just eager to get with this Honduran model, but actually it was just such an exciting experience to finally discover who he truly was.
It took a lot of meditation, a lot of time to think, but I think I've truly found myself in this.
Yeah, the Condescending Group is our sponsor. And we really appreciate their efforts to keep the Borderless podcast going, and we love them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, now let's talk about those trends. 2015, where do we stand? You've been doing this business for a while. What's it like today compared to 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Well, trends are, you can see, number one, people looking to internationalize themselves. I think the trend is growing tremendously. Now, on a larger scale, the trend is people are waking up. And I don't remember 10 years ago or even 5 years ago hearing people talk about the militarization of the police departments in the U.S. I don't remember hearing talk about you know, the over control of the government, the overtax. I mean, people always talk about overtaxing, right? I don't care if the government taxes 5%, people are going to complain about it. So that's always a common thread. But I don't know, it's like we're in an awakening where people, like normal people that you wouldn't, I'm not talking about activist people, you know, not you know, some of these crazies, not Michael Savage or, you know, some of these guys. I'm talking about normal, average, everyday people you're overhearing at coffee shops who are really, really irritated and aggravated to a breaking point about the way things are going. People are pissed off about Obamacare. Even Europeans, and I live in Europe. I lived in Europe for several years now. Even Europeans now are starting to realize that, wait a second, maybe Obama is really not the savior of the modern world. I'm starting to hear people that were once devout Republicans or devout Democrats starting to talk about how they're sick of their party and they're looking at libertarian candidates. You know, not that I personally believe, you know, all politicians are parasitic sycophants, but you know, that's neither here nor there. But I'm saying to go from being a staunch Republican to starting to think, you know, maybe that Ron Paul guy has something to say. You know, that is a huge shift in mentality. And I'm starting to see these trends in people that this is just outside of their norm, right? Outside of their regular thought process. And I like it. I like it a lot. And you can see some of the numbers, right? You can see the increase in the number of Americans giving up their U.S. citizenship. You know, that number for decades hovered around 500 people a year. And for the past, 3 or 4 years, that number has been accelerating dramatically. Now, I think we're looking at this year, if we stay on track, we're looking at somewhere around 5,000 people will give up their U.S. citizenship this year. Of course, that seems like, yeah, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So what? No big deal, right? 5,000 people. Look at all the hundreds of thousands of immigrants coming into the U.S. Well, how many of those penniless immigrants does it take to make up for, economically, to make up for one Eduardo Sovereign, who's a multi-billionaire who gave up his citizenship and moved to Singapore?
Right.
What's the economic impact of losing one Eduardo Sovereign to 10,000 immigrants coming here with 2 nickels to
That's
rub together?
That's a great point. Great point.
Well, and I've seen some stuff put out. I think I can't remember who wrote it, but it was some senator or something. He was making that exact argument of why they need to clamp down harder on expats because, you know, just one, you know, billionaire that they lose all this revenue and they can't allow that to happen.
Well, clamp down on them or decide to stop fucking with them.
Yeah, well,
there's your fuck, Bobby. No, go ahead.
That never comes into their mind.
God. Thank God. Right. Finally, somebody said fuck. All right. So, yeah, you're right. Stop fucking with them.
Yeah.
Stop this bullshit and stop making the country a place where productive people don't want to fucking live. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, make it a place people want to live in. Right. People want to live in Singapore because you've got a tax rate that's fair. It caps out at 16 or 18, something like that percent. The city is beautiful. It's an expensive place to live, but it's a beautiful city where you're not scared for your life. You're not scared at any one moment because you took a video of some homeless guy getting beat to death with a nightstick and you took a video and then you got shot in the leg for taking a video. That's actually a fear of mine, living in the U.S. Yeah. I don't live in the U.S. That's actually a fear of mine being in the U.S.
But you know what you said earlier, Bobby, I really get it because, you know, there was a time when people were complaining about taxation, but that was usually pretty much a partisan thing. Sort of one sort of person cared about that. As far as the militarization of the police, that's got more wider interest. And the whole NSA, Edward Snowden thing, That thing came out of the blue, and that's got people on both sides of the typical philosophical argument, very concerned. And so I think you're right. I think people are waking up.
Now, I'll throw a counterpoint to that. Mm-hmm. Not that people aren't waking up, but the fact that people are waking up could possibly, and technology could be the savior that helps wake people up and puts an end to the bullshit. Right? I mean, look at Egypt, right? Egypt had their revolution that would never have started without Facebook and Twitter. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have ever started because you wouldn't have been able to rally the people together in a mass scale without some social media to spread the message. Well, look at it today. I'm having this podcast with you guys on my Samsung Galaxy sitting in my buddy's kitchen. Mm-hmm. I can walk outside and video on the street with my cell phone. Name me one person that you know that does not have a cell phone with the capability to record audio and or video. Mm-hmm. Name me one person that doesn't have some type of social media account, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn or something, right? I mean, we're all on there. Mm-hmm. So I think technology is helping to awaken the people, and the technology has the potential, maybe, it has the potential. So I guess that's what it means, right? Maybe. It has the potential to keep these thugs, the police and the politicians and all this, it has the potential to keep these thugs in check. Because, hey, 10 years ago, there were still police beatings, but nobody was standing around with their iPhone or their Samsung Galaxy filming it. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, I don't think it was as bad as it is today. 10 years ago, it wasn't as bad as it is today. But also today, we have the ability to record it and keep these jerks accountable. Now, a lot of times, the police aren't being held accountable. That's a huge issue. I think that's one of the biggest issues because people say, oh, well, there's always a few bad apples. Well, guess what? If there really were just a few bad apples, the good apples would smash the shit out of the bad apples. Right. But they're not any good apples. They're all... I apologize. I'm just going on a rant. No. They're all fucking parasites. They're all shitheads. They're all high school bullies that couldn't get a job doing anything productive, so they became police.
There comes that sugarcoating again.
Well, I think another problem with the part of the police is that the way that we have it set up. I mean, people don't think of it this way, but I mean the justice system is the judges are paid the same pot of money as the police. They're all on the same side at the end of the day. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And those other police those other quote unquote good apples, why aren't they saying something when the bad apple is sitting there beating the crap out of somebody in a witness room? Instead, what did he do? He just went to turn the camera off. Yeah. Right. So, and then guess what? If that bad apple does get in trouble, what happens?
He gets paid. He gets paid vacation.
Yeah, he doesn't go to jail, right? He doesn't. Absolute worst case scenario, what happens? He gets 6 months severance package and he gets fired. Basically, that's the worst case.
And if they do, he does have to pay some money. Well, that's just paid out of taxpayer money anyway. So,
oh God,
right? The police department pays it, and they just raise taxes in that municipality to begin with.
Oh God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but the saving grace really could be technology because right now the police aren't held accountable for their actions, but that's coming to an end. I mean, look at Baltimore. Not that I agree with these retards that are out there burning their own city down, but there's a reason why they're upset. They're upset because police are just randomly beating the crap out of people because they feel like it and they can get away with it. Same thing in Ferguson. I don't necessarily agree with the riots and stuff, but the people have reason to be upset. And this stuff is going to escalate, absolutely, unless the police are held accountable. So I think there's going to come a point where it's either going to crash hard or the police are going to become accountable some way or another.
I read you on this. We live in Mexico, and when last few days I was talking with some Mexicans. And I guess the only difference as it relates to understanding the government is that it's much more obvious here in Mexico, the level of corruption that exists. And formerly, it's been easier. The U.S. has been very, very clever in their disguise of it, and people just haven't awakened to it. But now they're starting to, with all those smartphones capturing the police. This has been something interesting to me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I've wanted to know, just because we're seeing all these smartphone videos, does it really mean it's happening more? And, Fergus Hodgson of Pan Am Post published, he showed me an article that indicated actually it's less than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. But what we're seeing now is just the nature of monopolizing and legalizing violence in the hands of a small group. This shit has always been going on, and it's not even going on at the rate it used to be. Yes, they're militarizing, and they're doing it in different ways. And it's been suggested to me that so many people are in jail, such a high percentage of the U.S. population, maybe that's why crime is down, But nonetheless, people are waking up more because technology, as you've said, is hipping them to the reality of the situation in the U.S.
Right.
So as we talk about, internationalizing again, why don't you tell us right now, halfway through 2015, what jurisdictions do you find yourself setting up for people, offshore companies, bank accounts? Where does it make most sense?
Well, I'm biased because, this is our business. Our main office is in Anguilla. Mm-hmm. That's where our trust and corporate service office is located. That's where we have our license to do business. And we have a couple other places too, but that's our main office. And I'm not biased because our office is there. Our office is there because I was biased towards Anguilla, right, if that makes sense. Gotcha. Anguilla is a really good jurisdiction for offshore services. Number one, it's a British overseas territory, which means it's a whitelisted jurisdiction, unlike some of the sovereign nations, the smaller ones like Nevis or Belize or Cook Islands, because in many cases those places are blacklisted. For example, if you had a Cook Island structure, you can't open a bank account anywhere in Europe. It's been blacklisted by all the European countries. So it makes it more difficult if you're in a jurisdiction that's blacklisted in certain places. Nevis is getting a worse and worse reputation. A lot of it's because there's a trust company there that focuses on the Russian market, and there's always a lot of dirty business happening with Russians. And they're a pretty good-sized trust company that, because of their reach, they actually can muddy the waters in Nevis because of their own business, right? So, and there's also some other stuff. There was this Pakistani guy or Chinese guy, I can't remember, some Asian guy who bought a diplomatic passport in Nevis, and he traveled to Canada on it and got busted because it was just, he basically paid somebody off to get a passport. So now St. Kitts and Nevis passport holders have to have a visa to go to Canada because they have now blacklisted their passport, more or less. And that, a lot of this stuff kind of muddies the waters up for those guys. Belize has always been well known for dirty business. Now, with that said, that's another place where we have an office where we do corporate and trust services. Mm-hmm. And we have it there for specific reasons. It's a very, let's say, a niche market for specific clients and specific reasons. It's not my favorite offshore jurisdiction, but it is one we're very familiar with. But basically, when I do consulting with clients, I help them figure out the right situation and the right jurisdiction. Right. But for 95% of our clients, Anguilla really is the best jurisdiction.
Yeah, and the banking thing is a whole other story. I think
banking's a different story.
Right.
Actually, Anguilla is not good for banking. The reason being is there's only 3 banks in Anguilla, and none of them have an offshore banking license. So we actually cannot open bank accounts for clients in Anguilla. We use a couple of different banks. We have about a dozen or so banking relationships. So it depends on, what the client needs ultimately. Right. And it depends on how much money they've got. If I've got a small offshore bank that does a great job, but they only have about $100 million in deposits. If I got a client with $10 million, I'm not putting him in a bank with $100 million in deposits. Right. He doesn't need to be 10% of the bank's capital, right? So we're going to look at a bigger, probably a European or maybe a Panamanian bank or something like that. So it depends on the client's needs, a lot of it. But we have about a dozen different banking relationships with our trust company where we can open accounts for clients.
I brought up to you a challenge that I have. I don't know if many people have this or not, or if you hear it a lot. Most of my clients are in the U.S. that I do voiceovers for, and unfortunately, some of them are really stuck on this mailed paper check situation. And obviously, if everybody paid online, and going forward, more and more people will, well, that's easy. But you just get a merchant account and you're all set with your offshore bank. But what about the problem of people who still insist on mailing paper checks? Will these banks just accept them if you FedEx the checks to them?
They will. The thing I don't like about doing that is let's say you just had an offshore account and your client wanted to pay you by an actual hard copy paper check. You can mail the check to the bank for deposit. They will typically hold that check for 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks before the money clears. So that's the problem there. The reason is it's harder for them to collect money from a check. There's more work involved for them to collect money on a check. They're not in that U.S. system where they just run the check through the scanner and 5 minutes later the money's in your account. They're not in that ACH system.
Right.
So they have a much longer process to collect that money. As a matter of fact, most of the world outside of the U.S. doesn't use paper checks. I mean, I personally haven't written a check in more than 10 years. I haven't even had a paper check book in my hand in more than 10 years. I'm used to doing wires or a little bit in the U.S. ACH, but electronic ACH payments. If I were an American client, but they were a virtual nomad doing business around the world, and they still had a few holdout clients in the U.S. that wanted to pay with paper checks, I would set up a separate company in the U.S. I mean, we've done this for a few clients actually, where we set up a domestic LLC, like maybe in Wyoming or New Mexico or something like that, and you open a bank account in the U.S. And I would recommend, one of the big banks, Chase or Wells Fargo or something like that. And those big U.S. banks, they have the ability, they have Dropbox service where you actually mail the check to your specific Dropbox. We use Wells Fargo as an example. Your client mails the check to your specific Dropbox address, and then Wells Fargo just deposits the check for you. You don't actually ever have to touch the check. And so that gives you the freedom to travel. You can collect your money into your U.S. account, the account for your U.S. company. And then you would probably want to set up an offshore company for you to receive your ultimate money. So let's say 50% of your business was through the U.S., and we'll use New Mexico LLC as an example. You'd have the U.S. business pay, or the U.S. clients pay the New Mexico business, and they would mail their check to their Dropbox account, their Wells Fargo Dropbox account, which gets automatic deposited. And let's say 50% of their business is everywhere else in the world.
Everywhere else in the world, or they pay online in the U.S.
Or they pay online,
right.
Yeah. Then they would pay directly to your offshore company, and then just have every quarter your New Mexico company. If you had any U.S. expenses, pay all the expenses through the New Mexico company, and then funnel the rest of the money over to the offshore company, and that's where you receive your paycheck from. If you're living as a virtual nomad, we could get more specific client by client because it kind of depends on how we structure that based on the nature of the client's business and exactly what you're doing. But that's kind of a rough outline of one strategy you'd look.
I heard one cautionary bit of information. You sent me in the direction of the Glazers there in Dallas. And I actually got on the phone with Maury the other day. What a great guy. This is exactly the kind of guy I've been looking for all of my business life, But
Maury's awesome.
Yeah, but
I sent you. I like that guy.
But one thing he told me about that I have never heard, and I'm curious to see if you've heard. Apparently, with reference to FACTA, there is a coming legislation that suggests that when banks, like say a Wells Fargo account, is wiring or transferring money to offshore banks, that they reserve the right to take 30% withholding on that. Of course, supposedly you get that back after you do your taxes. But did you know about that?
I did, but I'm not sure if Maury explained it incorrectly, or maybe you misunderstood because I wasn't part of that conversation.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Basically, if the bank, let's say Wells Fargo is wiring, let's say $10,000 to an offshore bank account, basically all you need to do to not have that 30% withholding automatically, you need to make sure you fill in a W9, W8, sorry, a W8 that just tells the bank who the beneficial owner is of that company.
Oh, that's
so
it.
If you're the shareholder of that company, then that bank, Wells Fargo, needs to know that you're the beneficial owner. That way, or let's say you're not the beneficial owner. Maybe you're actually paying $10,000 to a partner, and that partner happens to be the company happens to be owned by a Mexican guy, for example. Well, in order to make sure that they're not avoiding taxes, he would just fill out a W-8 to make sure that they know the beneficial owner is not American. So if you're not American, then there's no automatic withholding. If you are American, there is not, as long as you tell them you're the beneficial owner.
Gotcha. I was not aware of that. That's great information. So this W-8 is provided at the time of the transfer or wire.
Usually you file it one time with the bank.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Well, okay, you might have to file it that one time with the wire, but then let's say you're doing 4 transfers a year to that one account, then they would have it automatically going forward.
Gotcha. Okay, well that was very helpful.
Yeah.
For me, yeah. I don't fucking know if anybody else listening to this, it's helpful for it, but it's been helpful for me. And I don't know if you ever get asked questions like this on podcasts. You probably are in a lot of them, aren't you, Bobby?
It goes in waves.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes I'm on like 4 podcasts a week and then I don't get another one for a month.
Right.
So
I see. So let me ask you this, Bobby. What concerns do you have going forward? Okay. Nobody knows what the future holds, and it doesn't make sense to get all up in arms over it, but is there any reason to believe that the U.S. government, for instance, will try to cause trouble for those with offshore strategies?
Yeah, there's always a risk that they're going to cause trouble for those with offshore strategies. Right. That's always a possibility. Now you got me, but I don't like predicting the future.
I know.
If they're going to cause trouble, okay, well, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Right. My biggest, it's not really fear, I guess. My biggest concerns, maybe, we've got right now, the U.S. is losing its dominance. Slowly, but it's happening, right? The U.S. is still 60-some-odd% of the world's reserve currency, like 65% of the world's reserve currency. Ultimately, what's going to happen is the U.S. will lose that feather in its cap. It will happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, will that happen next month, next year, or 20 years from now? You got me.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
So basically, you need to do things that hedge against that. That's one thing to hedge against, but that's not the only thing to hedge against. I mean, look at the stock market right now, right? You got the Dow and the S&P 500 at or around all-time highs. You got the Japanese stock market, the Nikkei index at about its all-time high. Chinese stock market's around its all-time high. The Hong Kong stock market's around its all-time high. You've got Draghi, the European Central Bank guy. They're printing, what is it, like $100 billion a month right now. I mean, they're printing money like crazy to kind of overcome their problems, let's say. You've got Greece that could exit the euro currency zone any day now. I mean, these are all risks that are out there that do have significant impact on global financial markets. There's a lot of risks out there in the global financial markets, right? I mean, the U.S. stock market trading at or near all-time highs. Well, that doesn't mean it can't go higher, right? I mean, interest rates are still stupid low. I mean, a 10-year Treasury bond still at 2-point-something odd percent, 2.3%. I mean, that's ridiculously low. We're virtually at zero interest rates. That's why the stock market's high. Money's being printed, and it's got to go somewhere. Money's like water. It follows the path of least resistance, right? And it ends up somewhere. Well, it ends up in the stock market because who the hell wants to buy Treasury bonds getting a 2% yield? It's not even beating inflation. So you don't want to do that. So where does it go? It goes to the stock market. Now you got price to earnings approaching 20%. Now, that doesn't mean the stock market's going to fall today, tomorrow, next week, next month. I really don't think the stock market is going to crash anytime soon, not as long as interest rates are still this low, because comparatively, the stock market is still the best place to hold cash right now, right? For most investors, So I don't think we're looking at a hard crash in the stock market, but you're also not looking at much opportunity either. I mean, in 2008 and 2009, I personally made a ton of money in the stock market. Why? Because nobody wanted to be in the stock market. That's when you make money in the stock market, is when nobody else wants to be in it. Everybody's in the freaking stock market now. That's why it's all run up. You know, I mean, personally, that's why I'm selling out of my stock market positions and buying real estate in markets that nobody wants to be in. Because that's, that to me, I don't know, I'm not the most brilliant investor on the planet. I'm certainly no Warren Buffett or Jim Rogers or those guys, but I like to think I do reasonably well as a contrarian. So for my view is the idea is you want to protect your own future, your family, you take care of yourself, your family, your kids, whatever. And if you want to protect that future, you got to protect yourself financially. And if you're invested in a place with a lot of risk, I'd start to rethink that significantly. And I don't mean just in asset classes. If you're 100% in the stock market, somebody needs to slap your face, basically, right? Somebody needs to knock some sense into you. If you're invested 100% in the Hong Kong real estate market, somebody needs to basically hit you in the face with a baseball bat until you wake up, right? I mean, Hong Kong property market right now is just astronomical, Or if you're thinking buying apartments in London right now is a great investment, you really just need to give up and just light cigars with $100 bills.
Someone needs to throw a piano on top of you from a 3-story roof. Right.
Yeah, I guess we could escalate this. Sure. Who's next? Right? We're going to run over him with a bus. I mean, so first of all, you need to think about where is your money treated best. Like I said before, money's like water. It follows the path of least resistance. So put it where it's going to be treated best. Is it treated best in the U.S. with a 40% corporate tax rate and governments that are out of control and can't stop spending money with zero fiscal responsibility and a stock market at all-time highs? Yeah, probably not.
Gotcha. All
Now,
right.
in 2008, when the market fell through the floor and was down, 50% or a bit more even, where was your money treated best? Probably the U.S., because it's the biggest consumption market in the world, and huge companies were trading at going out of business discounts. Mm-hmm. I'm an opportunistic trader. I'm not only investing outside of the U.S. for the sake of philosophically investing outside of the U.S. I was almost 100% in the stock market in 2008 and 9. So, because I'm opportunistic. So, I mean, look where your money's treated best. What's the next rising market? I mean, a lot of people are saying Latin America. I'm not really sure I agree with that. They have so many political problems in Latin America. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. There's always there. I mean, look at pretty much every South American country. It seems like there's always some problem to deal with, right? Yeah. Their problems go in waves, right? So I mean, maybe right now the best place to be is cash in a basket of currencies to hedge your risk.
I like that. That sounds smart. That's advice I'm getting from other friends and experts on that subject. Well, what about, you've got another sort of an insiders club, Global Wealth Insiders. Is that what you call it?
GWP Insiders. Yeah. Global Wealth Protection Insiders.
I see.
GWPinsiders.com. Yeah. That's our members group. That's basically people that are like really serious about taking action on internationalizing their life or their business or their wealth. We had a lot of information in there with information about how and where to get second passports or residency, where to buy real estate, some different international investment options, strategies for setting up your company offshore or moving your wealth offshore. Lots of different strategies like that. It comes in articles. So we have some articles, some of it's podcasts or interviews, some of it's videos. And then we also have a monthly webinar. At least once a month, we do a webinar on a certain subject. We just did one a few days ago about how to take your IRA or your 401k offshore, how to take control of your IRA or 401k and move it offshore if you want. We had another one. The month before was looking at international real estate on basically how to live rent-free internationally. That one would be really interesting for people that have a little bit of money that can buy some properties in a couple different places, because we did a webinar about how people could buy apartments in different countries and basically make 8 to 12% yield on the property, but still get to live in them once a week. So you could basically bounce between your own properties and live in different countries for a period of time, and you basically live rent free and make money off of it. So that one was pretty unique.
Gotcha.
And then also our insiders members get free consultations. They get discounts to events like this upcoming Panama event. They get discounts on offshore corporate services and trust services.
Right. So, I wanted to say about that for some of the listeners of the Borderless podcast who are maybe a little bit younger and they're entering the digital nomad world. It seems like to me, now I'm not a member yet. I haven't joined or anything, but so I can't really give you a review, but it looks like a pretty good option financially. And I think for what you get for it and the fact that you can get discounts if you're interested in some of these services, it's something you should at least be looking at.
Well, I mean, I would say if you're a younger person, I mean, it's a few $100 to join and it's $100 a year to maintain it. Right. And you can schedule a 30-minute consultation with me every month if you want. Right. I charge $200 for a half an hour consultation, or you can get a consultation with me every month. Right. I see. Right. So, and we can actually one-on-one discuss strategies just specifically for you. So, I mean, I actually reluctantly decided to do the consultations with clients. My business partner is the one that kind of made me do that. And I was like, God, I really don't want to kill my time like that. But he said, look, it's a huge value add. And I said, okay, we'll try it.
Well, I agree. I mean, people have all sorts of programs out there. And what I find is the programs have a lot of information, much of it not at all relevant to me. And I respect that. But what I'm looking for ultimately as a 49-year-old who doesn't want to mess around is some one-on-one consultation. So I appreciate that business model there. So James Guzman has a question he'd likes to ask all of our guests. James?
Yeah. So Bobby, if you have somebody maybe that's starting out, wanting to go international, wanting to bring their company to another country or something like this, or maybe just start their own business. Maybe they haven't done that before. What's the best piece of advice that you would give them?
Just one?
Sure. Yeah, let's keep this under half an hour. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, I'll try to squeeze it down to a half hour.
Okay, thank you.
The main thing, number one, focus on value. I see so many people that chase money. They're chasing dollars or euros or whatever. They're not chasing value. That's a huge problem, I think. People say, I just got to make money. What can I do to make money so I can live and work and do whatever internationally? Well, it's kind of the wrong question to ask. What can I do to make money? That's the wrong question, because what you need to focus on is what can you do to provide value. Money always, always, always follows value. Always. If you can find a way to provide value, then build a business around that way. You're creating value. Whatever you found to produce value, build a business to do that. I mean, a lot of people say, hey, I found this thing that really frustrates me. I bet it might frustrate other people too. And they built a business around solving this one little problem. I think that's an excellent way to start a business. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. You find one little thing that's aggravating to you. Well, you're probably not the only one that gets aggravated by it. That's one thing. And I mentioned the main thing, I guess that's my pitch on what you need to do starting a business. Too many people focus on just, okay, I found this product and I'm going to sell this product and it cost me 10. I'm going to sell it for 50 and I need to do this and this and this. Well, who knows? Who cares? I don't give a shit about your product. Mm-hmm. I give a shit about what your product can give to me, what value it brings to me. And too many people, all they care about is I can buy it for 10, sell it for 50, But when it comes to structuring your life, if you're looking to go on this digital nomad adventure, I mentioned it before and I'll bring it up one more time. Don't make your career the center of your life. Make your lifestyle the center of your life. You're not on this planet to do a job, right? You're on this planet to live and enjoy and to experience what the world has to offer. Make your lifestyle the center of the life. But obviously we all have to make money because we want to eat and live indoors. So build the career as the ring around your bullseye. Just make your lifestyle how you want to live the bullseye.
All right. Got it. Well, excellent advice, Bobby. And we really appreciate you coming on the Borderless podcast. Thanks so much.
Very good. Thanks, guys, for having me.
All right. So I'm really glad Bobby Casey came on the podcast.
Yeah.
I have found him to be able to communicate these things pretty well, at least to me.
Yeah, very knowledgeable guy.
Yeah, and I like it that he knew right away what I was talking about with reference to that 30% withholding that might be instituted. So I appreciate his knowledge about these things. Mm-hmm. It can be hard, I think, for somebody in that business because, they're not CPAs and lawyers, mm-hmm. okay? But they've helped so many people. They know the solutions, and they put you in touch with people like that, mm-hmm. And so it can be difficult for them to know all the specific ins and outs. But if they've got enough experience, they do know that stuff,
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I think that, because this is kind of the industry I've been looking in and kind of working in for a while too. And it's kind of a touchy area. Just there's so much red tape and, all these different variables that, all you can do is kind of give your best advice. And so anyways, I think that, well, you've talked to a number of people within the last month or so in the business, and you said that you think Bobby Casey is one of the most knowledgeable.
I'm impressed with his he's at the ready with all of the knowledge about the ins and outs of these types of things. It's very interesting. So anyway, tell me about our friend Alistair. Has he left San Miguel?
Yeah. So Alistair left.
Alistair Wilcox.
And I'd like to thank him also for he made a donation to the podcast.
Cool.
And I helped him. He came down here and got the VIP thing, and so I helped him get a bank account, and he got some dental work done, and he met the English speaking doctor and all this type of stuff that we did, and he liked it a lot. So he's still trying to figure out. He's got two separate homes right now, but I think that he is going to be changing his one in Acapulco to the one here. That was the last thing I heard from him.
Well, cool.
So,
it'd be great to have Alistair here. Alistair's originally from South Africa, very interesting life. Lived in Italy for some time, has been hanging out in Acapulco for some time now.
Yeah.
And so it'd be great to have him here in San Miguel de Allende. It'd be great to have you in San Miguel de Allende, too. And if you'd like an introduction, James has a service that he offers.
Yeah, and come on down. If you go on the website, you can see on this post, there will be a VIP introduction to San Miguel de Allende where it lays out all the different services that I can help you with if you want to come down here and get set up and, thinking about some more things that we can do. And also, if you are enjoying this podcast, please go to the borderlesspodcast.com and you'll see a big blue button there, and it says free instant access. And that will get you access to our Facebook group and also an ebook with some different resources that you can use to find a place that you might like to live or work. So please join us, and that'll get you on the mailing list to hear future Borderless podcasts.
Another Borderless podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.